August 1944. The sun beat down on a dusty road in northern France. Trucks lined the makeshift convoy route, engines rumbling, exhaust mixing with the scent of gasoline. Soldiers unloaded barrels, stacked in endless rows, each labeled gasoline, U.S. Army. The heat shimmered above the asphalt, distorting the distant horizon where tanks idled, ready for the next thrust. A German colonel, captured days earlier and brought to this forward supply depot, walked cautiously among the organized chaos. His eyes widened at the scale. 50,000 gallons of fuel, a staggering amount, more than entire German divisions could hope to secure in weeks. Every barrel represented mobility, firepower, and the relentless American advance. In that moment, the colonel understood a harsh truth. Germany's armies were running out of time. Industrial might and logistics had become weapons in their own right. Tanks, artillery, and infantry were not moving merely by chance. They were fueled, fed, and unstoppable. The capture of these barrels crystallized the realization. From the dusty roads of France to the front lines beyond, a single lesson echoed. America's capacity to supply its forces had become a decisive force in the war. Summer 1944. Europe was a continent in upheaval. The Normandy landings had shattered the Atlantic Wall, and Allied forces pressed inland across France. Cities bore the scars of occupation and bombardment. Roads, bridges, and railways, vital arteries of movement, had been damaged or destroyed in retreating German scorched-earth tactics. Every mile gained was measured not just in distance, but in the logistical effort required to maintain momentum. The Allies faced an enormous challenge, advancing faster than the Germans could respond, while ensuring that tanks, artillery, and infantry remained supplied. Armored divisions could move swiftly, but without fuel and ammunition, speed was meaningless. Convoys had to traverse bombed-out roads, navigate destroyed bridges, and avoid enemy ambushes. The task required a combination of military planning, engineering ingenuity, and sheer human endurance. American industrial capacity provided the backbone. Factories back home churned out thousands of trucks, tanks, and barrels of fuel. The Red Ball Express, a network of convoys operating around the clock, delivered this lifeblood to the front lines. Drivers, many of them African-American soldiers, faced grueling schedules, navigating narrow, cratered roads while hauling tons of fuel and ammunition. Mechanics followed closely behind, ready to repair any breakdown, while radio operators coordinated convoy schedules with near-perfect precision. Across the same fields, German forces faced starkly different circumstances. Fuel reserves were dwindling. Transportation networks were disrupted by Allied air superiority, bombing runs, and sabotage. Units relied on captured fuel, which was inconsistent and insufficient for large-scale maneuvers. German commanders anticipated slowing the American advance through attrition and delay, expecting supply shortages to stall armored thrusts. Yet the Americans pressed forward with a level of logistical organization that surpassed expectations. The human dimension of this logistical effort cannot be overstated. Drivers pushed vehicles to their limits, often through heat, mud, and shell-pocked roads. Mechanics worked under pressure, improvising repairs to keep convoys moving. Supply officers and planners orchestrated complex networks of depots and routes, ensuring that fuel, ammunition, and rations arrived precisely where they were needed. Every barrel of gasoline represented hours of labor, planning, and coordination, a silent yet decisive component of the advance. In parallel, German troops observed these movements with increasing disbelief. Reports filtered up the chain of command. Convoys arrived on time. Tanks kept advancing without interruption, and artillery positions were continually resupplied. The sheer scale of American logistics defied the German assumption that supply lines would falter under pressure. Fuel, long a limiting factor in military operations, was flowing in unprecedented volumes. By mid-1944, it became evident that the war in Europe was being shaped not only by combat on the front lines, but by the capacity to sustain operations. Speed, maneuver, and firepower were intertwined with supply lines that stretched across hundreds of miles. The Red Ball Express and associated logistical networks were not background support. They were the invisible engine driving every advance, every engagement, and every opportunity seized by Allied forces. This context sets the stage for a dramatic confrontation. The moment when a German colonel, witnessing the scale of American fuel supplies firsthand, realized the implications. What had seemed an abstract advantage, the industrial and logistical might of the United States, was now tangible, undeniable, and decisive. The next section will examine the continued pressure on German forces and the operational brilliance of Allied logistics that culminated in the capture of 50,000 gallons of fuel. By late summer 1944, the American advance across France had become a relentless push. Patton's Third Army and other armored formations raced through towns and fields, exploiting breaches in German defenses. Yet speed alone could not secure victory. Without constant resupply, even the most powerful tanks and well-trained infantry would stall. Fuel and ammunition dictated the pace of operations as much as strategy and combat skill. The German military, once masters of coordinated blitzkrieg maneuvers, now faced dwindling resources. Fuel depots were scarce, rail networks disrupted, and Allied air raids made resupply hazardous. Units were forced to ration gasoline, redirect trucks from one front to another, or rely on captured enemy fuel. Each decision carried risk. Tanks idled, artillery went silent, and the ability to mount counterattacks dwindled. German commanders increasingly recognized that their operational freedom was collapsing under the weight of logistical deficiency. In contrast, American supply networks operated with astonishing efficiency. Thousands of trucks rolled along carefully planned routes, forming the Red Ball Express and supplementary convoys. Depots were established close to the front lines, enabling rapid turnaround. Soldiers, mechanics, and planners worked tirelessly to ensure no disruption would halt the flow of fuel, ammunition, or rations. Night operations, advanced scouting, and meticulous scheduling minimized delays. Even damaged roads and destroyed bridges could not stop the movement. Supply had become as much a weapon as the tanks and artillery it sustained. The human element shaped every aspect of this operation. Drivers endured fatigue, heat, and constant risk from traffic accidents or stray enemy fire. Mechanics repaired engines, replaced tires, and improvised solutions in real time. Dispatchers coordinated hundreds of trucks simultaneously, ensuring convoys did not bottleneck or overlap. Each barrel delivered was a small victory, a thread in a vast network that allowed the Americans to outpace the Germans consistently. It was against this backdrop that the pivotal event occurred. A German colonel, leading a reconnaissance or raiding party, encountered a massive American fuel cache, 50,000 gallons, captured intact. For him, the sheer scale was incomprehensible. Barrels stretched across the depot, trucks loaded to capacity, soldiers working methodically. Every element testified to an industrial and organizational capability far beyond. This moment crystallized a harsh reality. The war was no longer just fought with bullets and tanks, but with logistics. The Americans had turned supply into a decisive weapon. The captured fuel symbolized not only immediate tactical advantage, but also the larger strategic imbalance. Germany's dwindling resources, stretched supply lines, and inability to match Allied operational tempo foreshadowed the eventual collapse of resistance. The implications extended beyond a single depot. Tanks could advance without waiting. Artillery could be redeployed quickly. Infantry divisions could sustain prolonged engagements. Mobility and momentum were no longer theoretical concepts. They were guaranteed by relentless, well-organized supply. For the Germans, this was not merely an inconvenience. It was a revelation that the balance of war had shifted irrevocably. This stage of context sets the foundation for exploring multiple angles of the story. The human courage of drivers and mechanics, the technological and organizational innovations, the leadership decisions that enabled this logistical supremacy, and a profound impact on German morale and operational planning. Each angle offers insight into how a single captured fuel depot could illuminate the broader collapse of Germany's strategic position in Europe. The story of the Red Ball Express and the captured fuel is, at its core, a human story. Convoy drivers bore the brunt of an extraordinary logistical feat, often young. Many African-American soldiers volunteered or were assigned to relentless shifts, driving trucks loaded with thousands of gallons of fuel across roads pockmarked by craters and debris. Dust clung to their uniforms. Sweat ran into their eyes. Yet they pressed on, maintaining an operational tempo that would define the advance. Mechanics and support staff worked alongside them, improvising repairs under pressure. Engines seized, tires shredded, and vehicles broke down, yet each disruption was addressed swiftly. Night or day, rain or sun, these men moved with purpose. Every barrel of gasoline delivered was a silent triumph, a victory that rarely made headlines, but was essential to the success of Patton's thrust across France. The captured fuel represented the culmination of their effort. From a distance, it may have seemed like barrels lined neatly in a depot, but each container embodied hours of labor, courage, and endurance. The German colonel who stumbled upon the cache could see the scale, but could not grasp the human resilience that made it possible. Soldiers' determination turned logistics into a weapon, and the human spirit became inseparable from the machinery of war. Technological angle. Technology was the silent partner in this story of supply. The trucks themselves, GMC CZKW 2.5-ton 6x6 vehicles, were rugged, reliable, and capable of navigating the devastated French countryside. Each vehicle was a carefully maintained tool, engineered to carry fuel, ammunition, and rations across hundreds of miles daily. Convoy organization and communication technologies ensured precise scheduling, minimizing delays or collisions on narrow roads. Depots were strategically placed to optimize distance and turnaround times. Soldiers used radios to coordinate movements, while planners tracked vehicle availability, fuel needs, and road conditions. Even damaged infrastructure posed less of an obstacle because of rapid engineering repairs and route planning. Bridges were shored up overnight, alternate paths scouted, and contingency plans executed with precision. The captured fuel depot was a technological marvel in miniature. Trucks offloaded barrels efficiently, storage was orderly, and supply chains remained uninterrupted despite enemy activity. This technological orchestration allowed Allied forces to maintain speed and pressure, demonstrating that in modern warfare, logistics is as dependent on innovation as combat itself. Leadership angle. Leadership was the invisible hand guiding this operation. Generals like George S. Patton and his staff understood that victory would be won not only in tank battles, but by ensuring that forces could move faster, farther, and longer than the enemy. Decisions regarding supply lines, convoy organization, and depot placement were meticulously calculated. The Red Ball Express itself was a product of initiative and leadership. Orders emphasized speed, reliability, and redundancy. Staff officers monitored progress constantly, adapting routes and schedules to account for obstacles. This foresight prevented bottlenecks, ensured fuel reached armored columns in time, and maintained the operational tempo that shocked the German colonel upon encountering the captured depot. On the German side, leadership struggled to respond. Limited resources, disrupted communications, and overextended units made countermeasures difficult. Commanders were forced to watch as American operations flowed unhindered, their assumptions about supply and attrition shattered. The captured fuel became a tangible demonstration of leadership executed flawlessly at every level, from planners to drivers, and the catastrophic consequences of leadership deficits on the other side. For German forces, the sight of an intact American fuel depot was both shocking and demoralizing. Commanders had long assumed that the Americans would be slowed by overstretched supply lines, that tanks and artillery could not sustain rapid advances without risking depletion. Yet here was proof to the contrary. tens of thousands of gallons of fuel, guarded, organized, and ready for immediate deployment. The captured fuel was more than a tactical asset. It was a psychological weapon. German troops confronted the reality that their logistical systems were failing, while the enemy's supply networks operated with near-perfect efficiency. Decisions that once relied on mobility and fuel suddenly became constrained by scarcity. Counterattacks were delayed, defensive positions abandoned, and morale faltered. The depot symbolized not just American capability, but German incapacity, crystallizing the perception that the war's momentum had irrevocably shifted. Moral angle. The story of the captured fuel also carries a moral dimension. The Americans who operated the Red Ball Express risked their lives daily to keep the supply chain moving. Drivers faced exhaustion, danger from enemy air attacks, and treacherous roads. Mechanics labored tirelessly to keep vehicles operational. Dispatchers and planners coordinated operations with precision, often under extreme pressure. Each barrel of gasoline represented not merely material, but human effort and endurance. The ethical weight of sustaining such operations, ensuring that soldiers had the fuel, ammunition, and rations to survive and fight, underscores the human cost behind logistical triumphs. While the battlefield often emphasizes combat heroism, the moral courage of those sustaining the army proved equally vital to victory. Their work, though less visible, was decisive in shaping outcomes and saving lives. Strategic angle. Strategically, the captured fuel demonstrated the decisive role of logistics in modern warfare. Mobility was no longer constrained solely by tactical decisions, but by the ability to supply forces consistently. The depot enabled tanks, artillery, and infantry to maintain momentum, outpacing German reaction and forcing a continuous withdrawal. American industrial might and organizational ingenuity created a self-reinforcing cycle. Tanks could advance further because fuel was available. Units could sustain operations because supply lines were secure. Momentum itself became a weapon. The capture of 50,000 gallons was not merely a localized gain. It illustrated a broader strategic imbalance. Germany, already stretched thin on multiple fronts, could not replicate such capacity. The disparity in logistical power signaled the inevitability of German defeat. The strategic implications extended beyond a single depot or campaign. The operation highlighted a fundamental principle. Warfare is sustained as much by organization, planning, and industrial capacity as by combat prowess. Fuel, once a mundane resource, became a symbol of strategic advantage. Its capture forced a re-evaluation of operational assumptions and underscored the extent to which the Allies had turned logistics into an instrument of victory. Together, these angles, enemy perspective, moral significance, and strategic impact, complete a multidimensional understanding of the captured fuel event. They set the stage for the climactic moment, when the German colonel fully comprehended the scale, efficiency, and unstoppable force of American logistics. The narrative now moves to the climax, where the decisive realization and its immediate consequences unfold. The day the German colonel encountered the depot is etched in the memory of Allied supply officers. August 1944, a reconnaissance party, tasked with locating vulnerable supply points, stumbled upon a sprawling American fuel cache. Rows upon rows of 50-gallon barrels stretched across the open field, trucks parked in disciplined formation, and soldiers worked with mechanical precision to offload, inventory, and distribute the precious liquid. The colonel paused at the edge of the site, his eyes scanning the magnitude of the operation. The scale was staggering. 50,000 gallons of fuel, enough to sustain armored divisions for weeks, perhaps months, sat ready for immediate deployment. He had expected scarcity, a disorganized supply line, anything that might allow German forces to slow the American advance. Instead, he saw order, abundance, and speed. American soldiers moved efficiently. Drivers coordinated with mechanics, swapping barrels from truck to depot, repairing vehicles in real time. Radio operators ensured the next convoy would arrive without delay. The scene was both mundane and extraordinary, a testament to planning, endurance, and discipline. Yet for the colonel, the sight triggered a profound realization. The war's momentum had shifted irreversibly. Nearby, armored columns awaited their turn to refuel. Tanks rumbled as fuel hoses were connected, crews climbing into cabs, engines igniting with a roar that echoed across the depot. Artillery units received barrels, preparing to redeploy at a moment's notice. Every tank, every truck, every soldier relied on these fuel reserves, and the Americans delivered without hesitation. The psychological impact on the German officers accompanying the colonel was immediate. They had anticipated disruption, ambushes, and attrition slowing the Allied advance. Here, none existed. The operational tempo, once assumed to be constrained by supply, was unfaltering. German morale began to falter as the scope of what they faced became clear. A foe whose logistical capabilities could not be matched, a force whose momentum was sustained not only by courage and weapons, but by an industrial and organizational might beyond comprehension. From the American perspective, the depot was another day of supply operations. Soldiers and drivers scarcely noticed the foreign observers watching from the tree-line. Yet their work had tangible consequences. Each barrel delivered, each convoy completed, each engine repaired was a step in a chain that would carry Allied forces closer to victory. The captured fuel was more than a resource. It was a symbol of unbroken momentum, a concrete manifestation of planning, manpower, and industrial power coalescing at the battlefield's edge. The colonel's realization deepened as he watched tanks roll away, engines fueled, artillery ready for movement. It became impossible to deny the implications. The United States could sustain operations at a scale Germany could not match. Tactical victories, no matter how hard won, could be reversed by sheer Allied operational endurance. Every captured barrel was proof that the Germans were running out of time, options, and resources. At that moment, the invisible hand of logistics became undeniable. The war, he understood, was no longer solely decided by frontline engagements. It was being fought in depots on dusty roads and along miles of convoys. Supply had become a weapon as lethal as any tank or artillery shell. The captured fuel crystallized the inevitability of German defeat. The colonel's expression hardened, a mixture of awe and despair. He realized that the Germans could no longer control the pace of war. Every tank fueled, every artillery unit resupplied, every mile of advance enabled by logistics underscored a singular fact. The industrial might and organizational skill of the United States had shifted the balance irreversibly. The depot itself remained calm, routine in appearance, yet it held the weight of history. It was not the roar of guns, but the silent certainty of supply that would dictate the coming battles. For those who witnessed it, both American and German, this day marked a turning point, a moment when the decisive power of logistics became undeniably, irrevocably clear. The day the German colonel encountered the depot is etched in the memory of Allied supply officers. August 1944. A reconnaissance party, tasked with locating vulnerable supply points, stumbled upon a sprawling American fuel cache. Rows upon rows of 50-gallon barrels stretched across the open field, trucks parked in disciplined formation, and soldiers worked with mechanical precision to offload, inventory, and distribute the precious liquid. The colonel paused at the edge of the site, his eyes scanning the magnitude of the operation. The scale was staggering. 50,000 gallons of fuel, enough to sustain armored divisions for weeks, perhaps months, sat ready for immediate deployment. He had expected scarcity, a disorganized supply line, anything that might allow German forces to slow the American advance. Instead, he saw order, abundance, and speed. American soldiers moved efficiently. Drivers coordinated with mechanics, swapping barrels from truck to depot, repairing vehicles in real time. Radio operators ensured the next convoy would arrive without delay. The scene was both mundane and extraordinary, a testament to planning, endurance, and discipline. Yet for the colonel, the sight triggered a profound realization. The war's momentum had shifted irreversibly. Nearby, armored columns awaited their turn to refuel. Tanks rumbled as fuel hoses were connected, crews climbing into cabs, engines igniting with a roar that echoed across the depot. Artillery units received barrels, preparing to redeploy at a moment's notice. Every tank, every truck, every soldier relied on these fuel reserves. In the quiet aftermath, the captured fuel depot stands as a symbol of a larger truth. War is won not only with courage or firepower, but with the quiet, relentless machinery of supply. Tanks advance because drivers endure heat, dust, and fatigue. Artillery strikes because mechanics repair engines in the middle of the night. Plans succeed because leaders anticipate every obstacle, every failure, and every possibility. The 50,000 gallons of gasoline were not just fuel. They were the energy of an entire system, a lifeline that sustained momentum and shaped the battlefield. For the German colonel, the realization was stark and unavoidable. Victory is ephemeral when one cannot match the logistical and industrial scale of an opponent. The depot revealed a truth that would haunt German command until the end of the war. No amount of tactical brilliance could compensate for systemic deficiencies. The Americans had harnessed organization, innovation, and sheer human effort to create a force whose endurance was unmatched, whose operational rhythm was unstoppable. This moment also underscores the human dimension of warfare. Behind every convoy, every barrel, were men and women whose endurance, ingenuity, and discipline turned mundane supply into strategic power. Their labor shaped the outcome of battles and the course of history, demonstrating that heroism can exist beyond the front lines. Ultimately, the captured depot was a harbinger of inevitability. It signaled the shifting balance of power, the triumph of preparation over improvisation, and the supremacy of sustained logistical execution. It is a reminder that modern warfare is as much a contest of organization and foresight as it is of courage and firepower. As history would show, the Red Ball Express and its counterparts did more than move fuel. They carried the momentum of an army, the hope of a nation, and the certainty of victory. The German colonel's encounter with that depot crystallized a lesson for all time. In war, the machinery behind the battle is as decisive as the battle itself, and the Americans had mastered it with relentless precision.